with specific photographs, sometimes you find the need to brighten up one area, but you can't afford to brighten up the whole photograph because then it would be overexposed. I'm going to demonstrate how to use Photoshop masks to be able to select a specific portion of your image without having to work on the entire image at the same time. With Photoshop masks, you can create free-form selections. You can select areas of color and make very precise selections. You can easily remove and add areas to your mask by erasing or painting, and you could save the final selection as a separate layer. So in the example that I'm showing you here, I have an image of my daughter who the area that she's sitting in is fine the way it is, but because she's a little backlit, her face is a bit dark, and so is the rest of her body. So one of the first masks that I could work on is a gradient mask. So I decided to work first with the background so then I could see how she fits within the photograph. When you first choose your gradient tool, you're going to be setting some of the parameters up on the top. You're going to leave your foreground and background with the black box on top of the white box. And you're going to select the first option, which is linear gradient. Under mode, you're going to select normal. Under opacity, you will select 100%. And you're going to make sure that dither and transparency are selected. So dither prevents banding on your gradient, and transparency ensures that you have a smoother transition. Before you go ahead and make a selection, you need to make sure that you have the layer selected to how you're going to make the selection is with your gradient tool, but the layer is where you will change exposure in that area in the mask that you chose. So I have my gradient tool selected. I am going to go from the inside of my image and I'm going to drag out, keeping my finger down on my mouse. Then I'm going to release. You can also change the foreground and the background color, and I'll show you what the difference looks like on a different layer. I'm going to again do the same steps. I'm going to go from the inside, drag while my finger is down on my mouse, and release when I'm outside of the image. So basically, this is the opposite. So you have two different options to create a layer mask with the gradient tool. The option that I'm going to want to work with is this top one. So if I don't need this anymore, I can put that in the trash. And what you see here is a gradient where the bottom part in white is what will actually make the change. What's in black will be left alone. To get a better idea of what that would look like, you could go into your channels. If channels does not appear right next to your layers, you go up to window and make sure that channels is selected. In channels, you're going to see your channels. You're going to see your RGB channel. Then you're going to see your red, your green, and the blue. What you want to do is, once you create your selection, you'll see your curves to mask. You click on it, and what's in red will be what's not affected, and what is not in red will be affected. If you actually want to see the image of your mask, you could unclick all your channels, which is the RGB, and you could see here that what's black will not be selected, then it starts to pick up, and as it goes into purer white, that's where the change is going to occur in your image. So I'm going to turn my layers back on, turn off my mask so the red mask goes away. I will go back into my layers. Now when you click on your thumbnail for curves, you can go into curves. I'm going to get rid of this that I was testing. And I am going to place an anchor right in the center. And I'm going to drag down. And you can see that this bottom portion of my image has just changed. So if you want to see the before and after, that just made that darker bottom part really make the image be anchored. Before it was pure white, but now it has a little bit more drama and you can adjust that accordingly. The next option that I want to show you is an option using your quick selection tool. And again, I am going to create another layer in curves. And I'm going to select from my toolbar the quick selection tool. The quick selection tool makes you be able to select parts of your image a lot faster that are really precise, that then you can soften using the select and mask option to feather your edges. So again, I am going to leave this as is with the black box on top of the white box. With your quick selection tool selected and your layer set to go, you see that my selector has a plus in it because I selected from the top the add to selection. If you click on the first option, you can add to your selection by also clicking and dragging. But then if you need to remove from your selection, you press the option key and you could see that my plus turns to minus and I could remove from my selection. So it takes a little bit of getting used to, but the process is very quick. I generally stay on the first option from my quick selection tool because I can quickly remove from the selection by pressing my option key. I'm going to zoom in so I can see if I've missed any portion of her face. And I could see that here up on the top I missed some of her head, and then try to select a bit more of her head. And I'm going to check. You're going to see your marching ants, which means that that's part of your selection. Then I am going to go to my select and mask option on the top menu, and you could see that my mask appears in red. If you need to take away from your selection, Command Z clears it. You still have your brush. You can add to your selection if you need to. You can go up to the top and take away from your selection. And you could just start to fine-tune your mask. I'm going to go and add a bit more of her neck and make sure that her hair is included. Then over in your options, your select and mask options, you're going to get a window that lets you fine tune your selection. So again, what's in red is what's going to be doing the changes. The red is a color overlay and it lets you be able to see exactly what you've just selected. You could keep your opacity at 50% so you can actually see what's underneath, or close to 50%. Then you're going to use the smooth edge slider to make the edges of your selection smoother. And you could bring that up to about 15 or so. Then your feather slider could be set to about 20 to soften the edge of your selection. Which you can see it softened the edge of the selection. Then in your output settings, which is down here, you're going to choose output to layer mask. Then you click OK, and then your layer mask will show up in your curves. So now you have the freedom in curves to make your selection brighter. So this is with the brightness, this is without it. So you need to be careful when you make your selection that you don't start to see halos around the face. So when I zoom back out and I turn my mask on and off, you can see that it made a big improvement on being able to really zero in on my daughter's face. If you need to make further adjustments, you could go into channels, you could select your curves mask, you can zoom in so you can add to your selection. If you need to make corrections to your mask, once you zoom in, if you notice that there's areas in your image that were over selected, you can go to your brush tool. You can adjust the size. You go over to channels and you turn on your mask and you can add or subtract. So right now I'm subtracting because the white box in my background and foreground color is selected. To deselect, you go to black over white and you can adjust the areas of your mask that were problematic. So right now I'm going in and I'm kind of adding to the mask here because there were some areas where you could see a halo. So if you need to clean up and make sure you didn't forget any spots, you can deselect all your channels, and here is just going to show you what the mask looks like. So I have an area here that I will fill in, and my mask looks pretty good. So now I'm going to go back, I'm going to turn on my channels, turn off my layer mask, go back to the before and after, and it looks very nice and clean. Another interesting thing about your gradient tool is that you can select irregular shapes or select shapes at an angle to make your image a bit more interesting. So I'm going to go down to my adjustment layer icon. I'm going to choose curves once again. In my foreground and background, I am going to put black over white to make my selection. Then I'm going to click from the inside of my image at an angle this time and release to the outside, and you see your mask appear on your layer. Again, to see that mask, you could go to channels, you could turn on your mask, you could turn off your channels, and this is what my mask looks like. Now, when I go back to my layers tab, with my curves open, I have the option to make that top corner darker or lighter. So I choose to make that a bit darker. And the before and after looks like this. You can also change the color of a top corner. So let's say I'm in RGB now in curves. If you go to the drop down menu and you click on red, you can add a little bit of red to that top corner. You have to turn on to see the effects. So here is a little bit of red, which looks a bit awkward, but you can make that top corner a bit cooler, which starts to look a lot more interesting in that top corner. So I demonstrated in this tutorial a quick selection tool, making a mask with a quick selection tool, and I also demonstrated a gradient tool. And with both of those options, you could create really interesting effects on your image. One of the last steps is when you're creating masks, and you're doing this on a raw file, you need to save this. You want to keep your raw file intact, so you need to save this image as a TIFF or a PSD file. So you go up to File, then you go to Save As. You're going to save onto your computer. And you're going to choose TIFF. You're going to decide where that image goes. I will place it into my desktop, and I'm going to label it my daughter's name, and I'm going to give it some kind of description so I know which version it is, and I'm going to call it blue. Then I'm going to save my image. It's going to tell me that there's no image compression. You leave all these other options alone. You click OK. It's going to give you a message saying including layers will increase file size, and that is fine. And then you're going to see the progress of your save. Once your save is almost complete, you will see up on the top that your raw file has become a TIFF. So whenever you need to edit this image, you will edit it back from the TIFF. If you're interested in saving this image for posting to Tumblr or for printing, you would do another save as a JPEG. So here, again, you repeat the steps. You go to File, Save As. I choose to save on my computer because I do not have an iCloud subscription. Then once that image is saved onto my computer, I transfer it to a hard drive. Now I'm going to save this as a JPEG, and I could change the name, and I could call it anything like, now it's Alba Blue, but I'm going to call it Alba Blue Print. So I know that this is the version that I prefer. You could call it anything you want. You click Save. Then in your JPEG options, you're going to choose the quality to be 12. You're going to click OK. And you see that my image will be saved as a JPEG. I saved this JPEG to my desktop, so if I let you peek here and I close out this window, you see that my Alba Blue JPEG has been saved here to my desktop, and this will be the image that I will select if I were to print this image.